Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. We are back at Dirty Habit, one of our favorite restaurants in Washington, D.C. It's the name of the restaurant, not a proclivity of ours, just to be clear. It's in the Monaco Hotel, downtown Washington, D.C. You know, folks, I think obsessed is a proper verb. Obsessed with voting in this country. It really matters. I have two guests, a Republican and a Democrat. They are secretaries of state in their respective states. Adrian Fontes, Democrat from Arizona, is here, and Scott Schwab, who is the Republican Secretary of State of Kansas and also the president of the National Association of Secretaries of State. Gentlemen, good to see you.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Great to be. Do I need to call you Mr. President today?
No POTUS necessary here.
POTUS necessary.
Until I get my own security detail, it's just Scott.
Adrian, let's start with you. As my listeners and viewers know, Arizona is unquestionably a frontline state in the battle for what is democracy in our country, the means by which we can coherently, legally, verifiably, and transparently count votes and report results. What is the state of affairs in Arizona today?
The state of affairs in Arizona today is as it has been for decades. We are continuously and still running good elections that can be counted on. We have solid professionals, albeit now less experienced professionals, because we've lost a lot of folks because of the misinformation, disinformation, and the threats that a lot of folks have suffered. But we're in pretty good shape, all things considered. And our new folks that are coming in eyes wide open. They understand the environment. They understand the pressures that they're going to be under. Nonetheless, they are dedicated to making sure that democracy works, not just for Arizona, but for the rest of the country. I mean, we're all kind of in this together. And so I think we're in good shape. Now, that slightly damaged lack of experience, if you will, may give rise to human error here and there. But as long as the conspiracy theorists don't attack it too much, don't misframe it too much, make a bigger deal out of it than what it is, I think we're going to be just fine.
What is the state of play, Scott Schwab, in Kansas? And your overall assessment of where the nation stands as president of the Secretary of State?
Yeah, we're, as an association, I'll start there and then kind of come down to my home state, is we're dealing with what he's dealing with. A lot of election officials coming out of COVID. That was an incredibly stressful environment. Yep. So we lost a lot of our more senior election officials. And then, getting threats. I mean, I've got a county that has maybe 5,000 people in it in Kansas, and she got a phone call at the office saying, I just want you to know we're parked outside your parents' house.
She being who?
The clerk, the county clerk. They're threatening her parents, and she's in her 60s. Her parents are in her 90s.
What county is this?
I'm not going to. I don't want to call anybody out, but it's really sad because
What effect did that have on this clerk?
She's just like, well, she's pretty fiery. She says, well, if you kill them, it saves me time. And calling their bluff, and so that's why I don't want their name.
Filed under gallows humor, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, but she's just calling their bluff. But it's a county of 5,000 people. I mean, who's going to do a presidential fraud election in a county of 5,000? I mean, let's just say for some odd reason there was a conspiracy in Kansas to get Biden to win Kansas. He failed. You committed multiple felonies just to fail. And two, that ain't the county you're focusing on. But a lot of these folks that are spreading these rumors and just constantly trying to find a reason why their person lost, logic is not a part of the cranium. It has been lost, and there's no critical thinking, and there's
just discontent that has boiled over into conspiratorial allegations.
Yes, and then you have people that have, and I love the phrase that was in the Wall Street Journal that said, this has become an industry. Mm-hmm. People are raising and making money almost like a ministry. I know people that give Dr. Franks $200 a month to help his cause. I'm like, but he's been disproven. Their mind's made up. Don't confuse them with facts.
And it really all stems from what you said. Their guy lost.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's about this brand new thing in America called sore loserism. And at the highest levels of leadership, it can become dangerous to the entire society. Like everything that we do hinges on elections, right? And I liken it to, I've used this metaphor before, law, medicine, the arts and sciences, industry, travel, they're all different fabrics in this or they're different threads in this fabric, and elections are the golden thread that hold it together. And because one guy got pissed off because he lost the election, there's a whole bunch of people trying to pull that golden thread out that would disintegrate everything. And the people that are suffering the most are these local clerks, right? And and many of them, frankly, are women.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
the majority of them are women. And
Many
so
of the victims of this.
We're really
who getting the
talking
threats,
about
the text messages, the emails, the voicemail messages.
and they're really kind of horrific. So, you got a clerk that's got fiery, like you said, and has got some gallows humor. I know some folks who have suffered significant emotional damage, and
post-traumatic
harm.
stress.
Yeah, we've got one in Arizona who had 2 of her dogs poisoned as a means of intimidation. We've had folks, we've had folks that have suffered some real hardships. My own family and I have been threatened.
Yes,
and so this is a serious problem, because what they're doing is they're biting at the core of what holds us together, and they're destroying the faith that we have in one another as citizens, that civic faith that we should be able to share even across party lines.
Scott, you mentioned this idea of a grift. Is denialist industrial complex too strong a word?
It's nothing new.
I mean, there's money to be made.
There's money to be made
in election denialism.
Yes, but now it's a more commoner industry. I would go back to like Bush v. Gore and other times where it was the attorneys who made money off challenging elections. And now it's not the attorneys.
Time.
Yeah. It's so much easier back then. Can we just go back to hanging chads, please?
He's joking, folks.
I
promise
joking,
you, he's
please,
joking
trust
about
me.
that. We don't want any more hanging chads.
There's horrible equipment. But there's always been people that have struggled with losing. I mean, Hillary didn't concede.
She did concede. She called Trump,
but not that night.
Yes, she did. She called that morning.
She
called
you
that
would
morning.
know more than me. I
I've
finally had to
listened
go to
the
bed.
actual
I'm like, we
recording.
got our job done.
I've listened to the actual recording. You can read about it in my book, Mr. Trump's Wild Ride.
And I will be reading it. But the other interesting thing is, but even Stacey Abrams in Georgia, she was angry and couldn't accept loss. And this
filed 5 lawsuits, lost them all.
It was all the attorneys that were making money back then. Now it's not the attorneys. Now it's people who can get clicks on YouTube and make money by spreading similar conspiracies that in a lawsuit never would get court. But I don't have to go to court. I just need public opinion to cut me a check.
Well, and the difference, I think, is stark here. We didn't have a coordinated effort nationwide to overturn the actual results. And then what has spurred since then. That's the stark difference here. You have individual candidates being sore losers. That's not new, right? But this, and I think you properly kind of put it into like this industry, right, that has popped up. And one of the most disturbing parts for folks who are sort of in the hotbed of this stuff, I happen to be one of them, we've got sitting legislators who are just cannot come to terms with facts. We've got lawmakers in Congress who cannot come to terms with reality, and it's damaging to the body politic.
That's the voice of Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State of Arizona. Scott Schwab, Secretary of State of Kansas, is also with us. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Adrian Fontes about a member of the legislature in Arizona who wants to ascribe electoral votes only by the legislature. No voting required whatsoever. We'll talk about that in segment 2 when we come back.
We're expanding who it is that has power and who has voice. And he wants to contract that in almost a violent way.
Welcome back to the Takeout. Dirty Habit is our restaurant, one of our favorite places in the Monaco Hotel, downtown Washington, D.C. Adrian Fontes, Democratic Secretary of State, Arizona. Scott Schwab, Republican Secretary of State, Kansas, our guest. So, Adrian, as you know, there is a member of the Arizona legislature, Republican. His name is State Senator Anthony Kern, who has introduced legislation that would have the electoral votes in Arizona assigned entirely by the legislature, removing any consideration of what the popular vote total in Arizona actually was. You might be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, this is not flagrantly unconstitutional. The Constitution does create that choice, But as many articles written about this suggestion have pointed out, Arizona has never done it that way. And since the mid-1800s, no state in America has done it this way.
Well, we weren't a state until well after that was
Right.
no longer even part of the exercise. And yeah, I mean, look.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that there may be some validity to the old saying that we put the AZ in crazy. You know, it's just, it's one of those things that I don't understand how someone who pretends to be so fervently patriotic would be so willing to cast asunder the rights of his fellow citizens and just say, none of you matter. The only people that matter are me and my cronies here at the legislature.
Well,
and that's hard to stomach when all we've ever done in this country is include more and more and more and more people into the
process.
franchise of voting, into the voting. We have one American tradition that you can almost always rely on is that we're expanding who it is that has power and who has voice. And he wants to contract that in almost a violent way down to what I haven't even read it yet. The 30 senators and 60
The
representatives.
legislature and no other official shall appoint presidential electors.
Yeah, so like that's it?
Right. Scott, and this is a
First of all,
Republican
'cause
from
I'm a Republican, and I'm like, basically, you're a Republican that wants to expand government.
Well, not only expand government, but
take the people completely
take the
out
people
of it.
out of it.
Well, yeah, I
Get up
know.
on the
It's
mic,
just
Scott.
like, okay, so the whole point of Reagan conservatism is the old line, I'm from the government. The last thing you want to hear is, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. I don't need your help. I'm a responsible American. I don't need help from the government. Then in comes Republican legislators in the AZ of crazy saying, no, we do want the government because we don't trust our citizens to make a good choice. And I'm like, and you call yourself a Republican, I call you a populist. There is nothing Republican about that.
Well,
All right, I'm sorry. It's your state.
and I
I'm glad it's not
would
mine.
just say, to me, it's not even populism. That's the epitome of elitism. That's the epitome of saying none of you unwashed masses out there matter. None of your opinions matter. We will pick your president for you, and you'll just be subjugated to that. And if you look at some of the things that are really coming out of our Freedom Caucus in Arizona, I won't speak to what's happening in Kansas or elsewhere because I really don't know, but it's this bizarre elitism. Like, we're the only ones that can tell you how to do this, how to do that. And speaking of Reagan conservatism, the overreach of the state legislature into so many other areas. I mean, for the last several years, the Arizona state legislature has wanted to tell cities what they can do and tell counties what they can do and tell school districts what they can do. Absolutely trying to
subverting the old idea of local control is the more informed
100%.
and democratic
And that
form of
to
government,
me,
which I believe was consistent with Reaganism, New Federalism, all those sorts of ideas.
yeah, and you could listen to Arizona's Democrats. We sound more like Reagan Republicans than the current Republicans do.
I can't believe it. I'm gonna get so many comments on
Just
this,
say
but I'm
it.
going to be honest.
Say it.
Our Democrat governor gave one of the most Republican State of the State addresses this month, or last month. I guess we're in February now. Then I've heard from Republicans that I've served with in the legislature when I was there. And well, a legislator came out and said her tax plan is 75% of what I want. I never get 75% of what I want out of a tax plan. And so it is kind of this situation of, and she's been helpful to me as I've battled some crazy ideas in our state to know it's like, hey, I just know they're not going to override a veto.
You succeeded Chris Kobach as Secretary of State of
he did.
Kansas. He has a reputation. here
And now
in
he's my
Washington.
attorney.
Is he?
He's our attorney general now,
Right,
so he's my
exactly.
attorney.
So, what was that like, and how did you differentiate, and how do you differentiate your relationship to voting, what is or isn't legitimate about it, from what Chris Kobach brought to that conversation?
So Chris and I have a history because he ran for Congress, I think, in 2004. And I was running for my second term in the legislature. He's a little older than me, but not much. Our wives were always pregnant at the same time, so they get along very well. And then I was chair of elections when he was Secretary of State, and we got our voter ID bill passed. and it was bipartisan support. I think there was only like 8 no votes on it, and we worked really diligently with the NAACP to be. They were the best critics of the bill because we didn't realize our bill was so unconstitutional until the NAACP came in and pointed out how unconstitutional it was.
So they helped you refine
Oh,
it.
they absolutely did. I have a lot of respect for the NAACP in Kansas because they were able. If folks will listen to that group in Kansas, they help you make your bills better. The problem is they're labeled as liberal, so nobody wants to listen to them, so there's no critical thinking. And they were incredibly helpful to me as a chairman. And then we got the bill passed, and Chris was Secretary of State, appreciated it. And but none of the crimes, none of the fraud really came to fruition. And so then when I became Secretary of State, I campaigned on we're not going to do anything drastic because it's going to increase voter confusion. If we can increase anything we do is going to be on the back end. It's not going to be on the front end, so that voter engagement doesn't change.
That snacky lunch I mentioned has now
there you go.
arrived. There we go.
Goodness.
Brussels sprouts over towards these guys.
That smells like gold.
Yeah, keep the onion rings close to Adrian. Those
Yeah,
were
I'll
his
take some more.
special request. Exactly.
I'm going to need a small plate. That is, oh my word! I see what is your
Yeah,
favorite.
enjoy those. Guys.
I may not go back to work.
Brussels sprouts are the single
How do you
worst
not
thing
like
in the world.
Brussels sprouts?
Because I don't. And don't try to sell me on them. It's just not going to happen.
Elections on which we agree, Brussels sprouts,
Yeah,
we clearly do not.
I vote no on that side of the table. And you will respect my choice,
So,
sir.
I want to ask you both
I
about.
lost where we're at.
It's all right. Food has a tendency to distract. I want to ask you about something. We're recording this on February 6th, as my audience does know very well. Sometimes we talk about things that have just happened, and I'm going to do that today. Because a 3-judge panel here at the Federal D.C. Court of Appeals rendered a judgment, a unanimous judgment, on former President Trump's assertion of absolute immunity in relationship to actions he took leading up to and on January 6th.
Oh, today.
Yes, today.
I haven't seen it.
The court ruled, and I'm going to quote from this directly, "We cannot accept former President Trump's claim." This was a unanimous 52-page decision from 3 judges on the D.C. Federal Court of Appeals. "We cannot accept former President Trump's claim that a president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power, the recognition and implementation of election results. Nor can we sanction his apparent contention that the executive has carte blanche to violate the rights of individual citizens to vote and to have their votes counted." Adrian Fontes, your reaction?
Duh. I mean,
That's
no
your attorney
kidding.
response. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I went to law school. Yeah, no kidding. The rule of law, I mean, look, it says on the building, equal justice under law. And no, look, we got rid of titles of honor in the Constitution. We got rid of all of that stuff. There's nobody's above the law.
We got
And
rid
the
of a
contention-
monarchy.
And I will tell you right now, I'm frankly quite disappointed in the Department of Justice in slow rolling some of this stuff, right? I think they should have acted a lot more quickly, and I've made those criticisms. Where I've spoken with them. They're moving to change, and things are happening, and I'm glad about that. But yeah, no kidding, bro. You don't get to order assassinations just because of political rivals. I mean, that was one of the things he was saying that he could do. And if that's the case, he's arguing for Joe Biden to be able to knock him off, which is stupid. So come on. Like, again, my response is 3 letters long, and it's something akin to what Homer Simpson would say. Dope. Yeah, no
Scott,
kidding.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds while you chew your Brussels sprout.
That's a good Brussels
Jump in,
sprout.
and then I'll let you carry on the other side of the break.
Do
Do you find anything to fault with that, what I just read?
I would say that the argument is attorneys represent their clients.
Yeah.
And their goal is to get their client to win, even no matter how exaggerated the argument is. Do I think Donald Trump's making that argument? No. He's paying his attorneys to make an argument that he can win somehow.
We'll take that up on the other side of the break. That's
Yes,
Scott
we
Schwab,
will.
Adrian Fontes. I'm Major Garrett. Dirty Habit. Our lunch has arrived, and it's really good. Even the Brussels sprouts. We'll
How
see in a
do you
minute.
not like Brussels sprouts? Our job is not to run up the score. Our job is to make sure the rules are followed and the people who are allowed to participate get that opportunity.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we
unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be.
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happierness.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy?
None of us can be happy all the time. You need enjoyment, you need satisfaction, and you need purpose. It's up to you to be the master of your happiness. That is a really big deal.
Find out when we go person to person.
100% awesome.
You make this look good.
100% hilarious. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's so dope.
And you still haven't watched Ninja Turtles on Paramount Plus yet?
Y'all not as cool as I thought you would.
Oh, no, hey, man, listen, we were kidding.
Ninja Turtles is effortlessly cool and crushes for absolutely every age.
Jeez, Dad, you really went buck wild there.
Ninja Turtles, rated PG, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money?
If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Welcome back to Takeout. Pro tip, a very good lunch. I mean, really good lunch. Brussels sprouts, French fries, onion rings. That's all you need. Forget all the other stuff, especially here at Dirty Habit. Adrian Fontes, Scott Schwab. Adrian is the Democratic Secretary of State of Arizona. Scott, Republican Secretary of State of Kansas. I'm going to find fault with what you just said before we went to break, Scott.
Oh,
yes, the attorneys are making the argument, but you cannot ignore the Truth Social posts authored by the former president that say this exact thing, that he and every president needs absolute authority, and without absolute authority, the presidency will cease to function. He's made that argument himself.
I agree with you.
And the court today, February 6th, on a 3-judge panel, unanimously rejected that in this context.
There's one thing on saying it on social. There's another thing making the argument in court.
No, hold on.
And wait. I'm not saying it's okay.
Okay.
I'm not saying and they're allowed to, which technically they are. You
can make an argument in
you
court.
Can make
yes,
any type of argument you want.
His due process rights have been protected.
To be
he can make an argument.
Yes. I took my LSAT and I accidentally got elected, so I didn't go to law school. But my attorney friends would be like, my license. I'm not putting my license on the line for that argument.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
Do you find fault with that argument?
With the argument Trump's making?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just want you on the record.
So and it goes back to, this is not the Reagan Republicanism that we've come to know. And being from Bob Dole, it's not what Bob Dole would want. I mean, Bob Dole he ate dirt on foreign soil and became disabled to protect the freedoms that we have. It's not so that he'd fight for a president that can kill willy-nilly.
I will tell you right now, I applaud your defense of what so many Americans understand as republicanism, but I have to push back a little bit on any defense of Mr. Trump. And,
I'm not saying I'm defending him. I'm just saying, let's be honest, his attorneys are the ones making the argument.
Well, but they're not going to make the argument without him telling them to. Because you can't do what you can't do something that's against what your client's saying. He authorized it. He's the boss.
And he echoes it on social media.
So the bottom line is, he's responsible for the argument. He's flat
he's responsible
wrong,
for a lot of things,
and he needs to be held accountable. And I think that He should be held accountable. He should be held accountable for all the nonsense that he's created because he has engineered this crazy. Look,
but not too long from a minute ago, Adrian, you mentioned that you have been critical of the Department of Justice. If this had been charged earlier, if a special counsel had been appointed earlier, this would not be bumping up against the election season in the way that it currently is. Is that one of the reasons you fault the Justice Department?
Yes. My most recent criticism of the Department of Justice was that they were really slow to investigate and prosecute folks who have been harassing election officials. And I consider that to be domestic terrorism. I mean, the definition of terrorism is the threat or use of violence against someone to reach a political end. And when you're threatening election officials, it's a political end. That's the only reason to motivate that would motivate you. They're not treating it like domestic terrorism, and that's why I criticize them. I have spoken with the Department of Justice. I've spoken with the FBI since then, and we are working together to make sure that they're getting the stuff done that they need to get done. And I think that it's important that folks know these are the kinds of dialogues that have to happen in our society. You're supposed to be able to criticize folks, and I've specifically said the White House needs to stay the heck out of it because that's what would make it political. But when it comes to the point at issue here, you cannot have immunity in this way that was advocated for and approved by Mr. Trump.
By the client.
And that's you just can't. It doesn't. It is unreasonable on its face. And I'm really surprised that any lawyer would stand before a court of competent jurisdiction and make that argument.
I want to ask you about something else happened on February 6th, the day we're recording this, because I think it's going to be an issue that everyone in the election space will deal with in 2024.
You really like dropping these grenades when we haven't a chance.
Well,
I'm feeding you.
Homework.
I'm feeding.
Right.
I'm also feeding you. So
I'm
eat
not going
up
to argue.
Yeah.
and fortify yourself. So in New Hampshire today, the Department of Justice of the state of New Hampshire and the FCC issued a cease and desist order against something called Life Corporation, Lingo Telecom, and Walter Monk for putting out a AI-generated robocall that mimicked President Biden's voice before the New Hampshire primary, misinforming those who received the call about the date of that primary. This is an AI-generated thing that made it sound very much like President Biden. So my question is, how big a concern is AI in this space? Scott, go ahead.
And Adrian, I'm going to give credit to him because he has TSMC in Arizona. He's been dealing more with technology and semiconductors, what's going on in Arizona. There's a difference between, and that so many folks misinterpret what we do. And I wrote a co-piece with Jen Easterly, the director of CISA, that was in, I can't even remember the magazine now. It's been reproduced everywhere. But basically, the point I want in that article is we don't do campaigns.
Right.
We do elections. My concern with AI is not that a candidate, someone uses AI to misrepresent a candidate. I don't do that. I'm the referee. If I'm a referee on a basketball court, which I'm still mourning the loss of KU's game last night, but I digress.
This MU grad is not, by the way, for the record.
Yeah, I know.
Care less about KU.
We'll be in the tournament this year. So anyway,
I don't even know what conference I'm in anymore at Arizona State. Right. So you guys are lucky.
We, but you know, our job is not to say, "Oh, that's not the real player. This is the real player." That's not our job. Is not to run up the score. Our job is to make sure the rules are followed and the people who are allowed to participate get that opportunity as so chosen. If that's a campaign issue, my concern is somebody doing the same robocall as my voice saying, due to the increased turnout of voting, we're extending the election one more day into Wednesday. So Democrats, please vote on Wednesday. And stupid stuff like that.
Or this precinct has been moved, or something like that.
Or changing to anything where it causes election confusion in the actual process of the election. Yes, and we are working our legislature to make that a law.
Yeah, so we've got some of our colleagues, Steve Simons in is it Minnesota or Wisconsin? I always get those two confused. They've got a great set of statutes that they just passed.
Minnesotans get Arizona and New Mexico confused, just for the record.
That's fine. You know, I don't take it personally. I know Arizona's better.
Nobody gets Missouri and Kansas confused.
Nope.
Point is, there's already some folks that are sort of at the head of this, and moving through. Like I said, there's some great legislation up there. We just had a tabletop exercise in Arizona where we brought together 200 election administrators, and we worked through some of the threats that generative artificial intelligence portray. We had experts from across the country, from Palo Alto, from a lot of these companies, come in and talk to our elections officials to tell them what to recognize and sort of kind of become familiar with what this thing is, because you can't fight it if you don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And I don't disagree that this is a threat, but it's not new. It's an amplifier, and it's an enabler to what we've already seen. So I remember a municipal election not too many years ago in the city of Tempe, mm-hmm. Arizona, right, in Maricopa County, where one of the campaigns mistakenly put out the wrong day for Election Day. They put the wrong day on their flyer. Okay, now imagine that somebody did that, but it was through a social media post generated by artificial intelligence, and it went to a gazillion people instead of just those voters in those precincts. Again, not a new problem, but a new tool that the bad guys are engaging in, because you got to be purposeful in creating this stuff. So I'm really hoping that law enforcement gets all over this, and I'm 100% behind New Hampshire and the officials there that are chasing this down and I hope they prosecute it vigorously. I hope they prosecute it fiercely and quickly, and I hope they get some big penalties, because this is dangerous. It's very dangerous.
The voice of Adrian Fontes. When we come back, you'll see that I'll have reached across the table and gotten me some of these onion rings. Our continued conversation, we come back. Segment 4 is coming your way. Oh, see, it's just happening right now. Thanks, Adrian. Back in a minute.
The incitement of a riot is a felony in Arizona. The words have meaning. Not all speech is protected by the First Amendment.
In America, the future belongs to everyone. Let's create yours with a built Ford Tough truck. Ford F-150 with impressive max towing capability and available Pro Power on board, so you have power on demand. Be future ready with Ford F-150.
This case, the murder's still on the street.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours. Eyes of a criminal.
Is that there dead? The defendant over there, Alex Murdoch, opened fire. Pow.
Investigators say human remains found this week.
1997. 4 families shattered when their daughters disappeared.
Psychopaths are without guilt and they are without remorse.
The mystery of what happened would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Why did you buy that sledgehammer? You gonna do some home improvement, or were you buying a murder weapon?
When you hear the name Gabby Petito, what comes to mind?
Would Gabby Petito still be alive today if the case had been handled differently?
He pointed a gun to me and said, "This is the day you die," and he shot me.
You're talking here about a very messy crime, and yet there's no physical evidence that connects him to the scene.
I'm an innocent man, and I hope the whole world can see it now.
A suspect is under arrest for the quadruple murder of 4 Idaho college students.
Like a John Grisham novel come to life.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
1, 2, show 'em what you got. We're going to the Super Bowl!
Game's not over. Buckle up. Get the Paramount Plus with Showtime plan.
Welcome back to the Takeout and our very fortifying lunch of Brussels sprouts, onion rings, French fries. That really is all you need, folks. Here at Dirty Habit, Monaco Hotel, downtown D.C. Adrian Fontes, Democratic Secretary of State, Arizona. Scott Schwab, Republican Secretary of State, Kansas. You probably thought you'd get out of here and have lunch and not have to talk about the 14th Amendment. Wrong. You're going to have to talk about it.
That's the center square on the bingo card anymore.
It is. Adrian, your impressions of the debate as it currently stands and any expectations you do or do not have about what the Supreme Court will rule on this momentous question.
What do I think the Supreme Court's going to do? Boy, your guess is as good as mine. You know, this is a 6-3, very conservative Supreme Court. It's going to be for a long time, and they're going to have to face the consequences of this decision for a very long time.
Do you think Trump should be on the ballot?
I don't know that he should be on the general ballot because I don't know what the voters have said. But I do know that he belongs on Arizona's presidential primary ballot because in Arizona the statute says that if 2 other states put him on the ballot, I'm obliged to put him on the ballot. So the law tells me that I have to put him on the ballot, and that's what I know. You know, my personal opinions and my personal votes, I try to keep them a little closer to the vest, but you can guess by the D behind my name what I think about whether or not he...
an opinion about what the Colorado Supreme Court ruled and the ruling itself?
Well, I think the Colorado Supreme Court very interestingly reversed the district court where they said that the presidency is not an office of the United States of America. But the district court had laid out a very, very detailed factual case as to why disqualification was important. And the only hook they left was, or the district court judge left, I think that particular judge said, but it doesn't apply because the presidency is not an office. So reversing that one piece allowed all of the rest of those facts to come into that ruling. I think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have a tough time getting around those factual findings because at the end of the day, they're an appellate court, and they can't refine facts. They got to go with the facts that were found at the trial court level. So this is a really, really interesting conundrum. If you are on the U.S. Supreme Court and you don't want to disqualify Mr. Trump, you're going to have a hard time working your way around that.
Scott Schwab?
I don't necessarily agree with that you don't have to be found guilty first. My concern...
Of insurrection.
Yeah.
Right.
He hasn't been tried. And so I don't want the arbitrary authority as a secretary of saying, well, I think you did, so therefore I can take you off the ballot. And a bigger concern, and we shared, a lot of Republicans wrote, and it was actually very nonpartisan intentionally when Missouri Secretary Ashcroft wrote an opinion, an amicus brief to the court, because if the more nonpartisan it is, the more people we get to sign on. But it's basically saying, what happens if I have one county that says he can't be on the ballot?
Mm-hmm.
Now it gets really deeper still, is what if you have somebody else then retaliatory says, well, I think Biden for XYZ
shouldn't
be on the ballot. And you can say, but there's no trial. You're taking it out of the 3-branch system and you're putting it in local officials that can use it for personal use, as opposed to going to an actual process to say this person's name is not on the ballot. Here's where I get concerned where this is going. Let's say Trump is elected, he becomes the nominee, which is not for certain yet. He becomes elected as president and then found guilty of insurrection. And then the Democrats in Congress say, we're going to take the electors away and appoint somebody else because he's now guilty of insurrection. I think that's where the big problem is going to be, is after the general, if he wins the election, you're going to have people on the far left say he is guilty of insurrection. So now they're the ones that are going to try to overturn an election. And that's where this gets really scary. And as Republicans gave them the roadmap on how to do it. Mm. And they're like, hey, we're just doing what the Republicans did 4 years ago or tried to do. That's where I really get concerned. And the Republicans aren't going to be able to say, well, that you can't do that. Well, you started this fight.
So I think first and foremost, Scott's a good guy, and I disagree with him. I don't think you need a criminal conviction, and neither does the law. It doesn't say you have to be convicted.
Of insurrection.
This is a political thing, right? And I say political with a little p. This isn't a partisan thing. It is.
The post-Civil War history of this being actually put into motion did not require convictions.
Right, and we also have individuals later on who were never convicted in any other trials being reinstated or having that Section 3 prohibition lifted by an act of Congress, and there were no trials.
Majorities in both chambers.
Right, and there were no trials to convict them of that in the first place. So we know that you don't need a criminal conviction. I know some people are asking for that, and that's fine. But the other question is, at what point do we allow bad behavior to continue? At what point do we allow the call? I mean, look, inciting a riot is a felony in Arizona. Okay, the incitement of a riot is a felony in Arizona. The words have meaning. not all speech is protected by the First Amendment. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. These are legal precepts and concepts that we understand to be true. And at some stage of the game, we have to hold bad actors accountable. The way we hold them accountable is pretty well laid out already. And so, I take a little bit of issue with this.
You're going to get the last word.
Yeah, my concern is I don't want that arbitrary authority. I'm a secretary. I am not a policymaker. And so I don't want that authority. I want the court to tell me. The number of times I get sued, and I welcome the lawsuit because I said, the law's unclear. Your Honor, you tell us what to do, we'll do it. We partner with the branches of government. I don't always try to fight against them. I don't want the arbitrary authority to say, no, this is not your day. I'm the secretary, and you're off the ballot. That puts every secretary in a bad spot, whereas the court can use a legal opinion to say what we can and cannot do, and I think there's safety in that.
That was the voice of Scott Schwab, Republican Secretary of State, Kansas. Our other guest, Adrian Fontes, Democratic Secretary of State of Arizona. And as I mentioned, stay tuned for your Takeout Outtake Especial. That's next.
I'm a Phil Collins guy.
Great.
Genesis all day long.
That's fantastic.
Super Bowl commercial in Ghana.
I think it's important being able to tell the nuance and the textures of our own people.
We have a program called the International Pathway Program, and he discovers this within the spot.
Ultimately, the message is that football's for everyone.
Regardless of where you're born, you have the opportunity to play.
The people with incredible athletic ability, they're not just in America, right? They're everywhere.
Think about how much more potential there is to tap into.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Paramount Plus knows heroes. We've got heroes undercover, under helmets.
We have something the enemy does not.
And underwater.
I'm gonna need some powerful backup.
And a Paramount Plus subscription is included with a Walmart Plus membership at no additional cost. So you can be the hero of your home.
Who, me?
For generations, our table has been more than a table. This table is the birthplace of ideas and a place where love resides. Our table has been the world's table where everyone comes to eat. Our people, Black people, are the pulse of this world. So take your seat.
Welcome to your Takeout Outtake Especial. I'm Major Garrett. Our host restaurant, Dirty Habit. Our lunch
is a dirty habit. It's a bunch of fried food.
Yes, it is. It is not trainer compliant. I would be the first to admit that. Crispy Brussels sprouts, onion rings, French fries. Adrian Fontes, Democratic Secretary of State, great state of Arizona. Scott Schwab, Republican Secretary of State, great state of Kansas, our guests. Adrian, I cut you off because we had to go, but any other thoughts you had on 14th Amendment? Accountability thereof.
Yeah, I definitely think that we, as a society, have to come to terms with whether or not we're going to accept the rule of law. We have to come to terms with whether or not certain people are not held accountable because of their fame, because of their money, because of their station. I think we have to come to terms with the rule of law means we are all equal. And the common theme that I hear on the cheerleaders for the former president is that there's a lot of hedge against the rule of law. There's a lot of hedge against we are all at the end of the day accountable for our actions. And I don't know that that bodes well for tomorrow. I don't know that that's a good lesson that we should be teaching our kids, that you can act this way and you can do this and you can incite that and it's okay because of who you are celebrity-wise.
Scott, jump in.
Yeah, that's a broad brush. I wouldn't say it's okay. But I would say if we're going to say we have to decide if we're going to, there's a difference between there's a we and an I. So the question I have is, do I have the authority to do that accounting?
It's Secretary of State.
It's Secretary of State,
Yeah,
and
if
I
the
don't.
people gave you that power. They gave you that power.
But I would argue they didn't. They gave me the power to put them on the ballot, not to take them off. And I would say the only people who can really take off is clearly Kansas statute, U.S.
Or
statute,
direction from the Supreme
or
Court.
direction from the court, which is why I'm glad it's going to the court, because then we have direction. I would believe that, and this is what I love about our multi-state system, is if the court says, yeah, you can do that, Kansas is going to pass a law to strip me of that authority, because it's not me. Mm-hmm. It's about the next secretary. What are they going to do?
Right.
And so that's where the accountability would come in.
Before we had the Especial, both my distinguished guests were like, Especial, what is that? Well, what it is the fun and games part of our conversation. Okay. So, 3 questions. We ask every guest who's been on the show. We're in our 8th year, so everyone loves these questions. They take them on, and the audience digs the answers. I'll start with you, Scott, and then we'll go to Adrian. Here are the 3 questions. Most influential book in your life and why? All-time favorite movie? Long flight or a long drive? What kind of music are you most likely to listen to really enjoy something musical?
That sounds like 4 questions.
It's 3.
It's 3. It's
Was it 3?
Yeah. On a long drive, what music are you going to listen to?
Okay. Not where you're going.
So,
what are you going to listen to?
Okay, now give me the first one, because
influential book.
Obviously, being a disciple of Jesus, I love the Bible.
Very acceptable answer.
Very broad answer. I'm a big David Kavanaugh fan. I love 1776. I poured myself learning colonial history, and I would recommend anybody read that book. But above that, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie twice a year for 8 years straight.
Wow.
Because I was an arrogant young man, and I needed to learn humility.
Okay, past tense.
So I'm better than I used to was. Yes, I was. I had hair, too. Still working on the humble part.
Yeah.
Next question was...
Favorite movie?
As of right now, I still like The Longest Day with John Wayne. I mean, it's such a good movie. I have been watching Lincoln.
Great
because
movie.
that movie really portrays how...
Doris Kearns Goodwin was a guest on the show.
Yes. Oh, really?
And she wrote the book that was the basis for Tony Kushner's screenplay for the movie.
That movie really was the most accurate Hollywood portrayal on how legislations and things get passed through a legislative body.
The reason I love that movie is politics is the hero, not the villain.
Yes, it is.
That's why it's a great movie.
And often I'm called the villain because I'm in politics.
Exactly. Music.
I'm a Phil Collins guy.
Great.
Genesis all day long.
That's fantastic.
A little bit of Susu Studio.
It's not my favorite, but it's great.
I mean, I love country being from Kansas.
I'm a huge Genesis fan. Phil Collins.
I love Phil Collins. I hope to meet him someday before he goes the great by and by. I heard he's not playing drums anymore, which is a heartache.
Oh, yeah, it is. Adrian.
Well, book is easy. Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces. I think storytelling is the one thing that absolutely unifies all of humanity. That's the one thing we do together.
Every culture, every language.
Every culture,
every
every language, everybody. That notion of storytelling and that hero's myth, that hero's journey is it's so important to the way that we are, right? It's so fundamental.
Say the title of the book again.
Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces. Absolutely great stuff. I would recommend it to anybody who's into either or all poetry, playwriting, journalism, any kind of writing, politics. Politicians all ought to read that because it really helps sort of form that narrative that I think is really important. My best movie is A Three-Way Tie, right? Okay. And so it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Star Wars Episode 4,
right?
The
New Hope.
A New Hope. And frankly, the old classic Casablanca.
Yep.
It's one of the funniest movies.
Yep.
Okay, I got a little bit more respect for you than I did before. That's good.
The humor is so understated and biting.
Yes.
In some places. It's just there. So anyway, I love the movie, and I love kind of that old timey romantic kind of everyone's on their honor, even if they're thieves, right? That kind of a thing. I love that. And music on a long drive. I will tell you right now, or a long flight. I still have it, but I will preface with a little bit of something that people don't know. When I was an undergrad at Arizona State, I was the lead male vocalist in the mariachi there.
Nice.
And so listening to Mariachi Vargas de Tecalitlan's Centenario, their 100-year anniversary album, And yeah, that band's been around for 100 years. Wow. It is the epitome of mariachi. It's the big
cross-generational.
Cross-generational. It's really wonderful. They're all amazing musicians. Their album celebrating their 100th anniversary is one of the best pieces of music, and it is the standard as far as I'm concerned for mariachi music. I'd listen to that anytime.
That's why the Especial is special. You get answers like that. Adrian Fonte, Scott Schwab. We'll see you next week, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks.